Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining me this next hour. You are listening to Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks on Transcendental Tuesdays. That's when we broadcast live on 12radio.com, and we also simulcast on my YouTube channel, which has the same name as the show, Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks. So thank you for coming today, and hopefully together we will change the way that we listen to the world. This is August 26th, 2025. And the star of the show is Venus in Leo, which truthfully, Venus usually only spends 3 to 4 weeks in a sign. It is a big deal. I mean, I don't like to, demean any of the planets just because they're really fast ones. But as we look at Venus in Leo, you might think, hey, this seems like a big deal. And maybe that's just my personality, but it is a big deal. And I'm going to explain why. It's because of all the connections that she's making in the first couple of days of this particular transit. And I think they are important for anybody who is wanting to initiate something new. Maybe you want to get into a relationship. Maybe you want to get out of a relationship. Maybe you want to change your lifestyle. Maybe there's something that you're passionate about that you just haven't brought into existence. Well, Venus in Leo is a good time to look at a lot of those issues. And so that's what we're going to do today. Venus moved into Leo yesterday. That was Monday, August 25th. So, and she'll be there through September 19th, and actually the early morning. So let's say the 18th of September. So before we get started, I want to do a shout out to Mark's Power Peak, which is the online newsletter. I write a column. It's called The Week Ahead. So when you're listening to the show, or you just want to check in throughout the week and see what's going on any particular day, go ahead and open that up, and then you can see where's the moon, what planets are doing what on that day. And of course, that's my interpretation. And any of you who have been around astrology for very long know that for every astrologer, there's a different interpretation, which actually is a good thing, maybe, because it's fun. And we put our individual stamp on everything that we do. So go ahead and check that out. And there's other articles there too that I think you'll enjoy that are about tarot and I Ching and feng shui and numerology and general spirituality and things that you might be interested in. So go check that out. And please, if you want to, come join me over on YouTube and join me in the chat room. People are already there. Hey, Quali, it's good to see you. And Renee, I see a few people kind of coming in and making comments. And I do like to, just have that open and pay a little attention when I can and answer questions if I can during the stream of the show. So, and also subscribe to YouTube if that's something that you want to do. So then you'll know when there's new shows posted. And of course, we do archive the shows over on 12radio.com. You'll find them under the On Demand tab, or you can find them on YouTube by looking for the tab that says Live. You guys probably know a whole lot more about this than I do. I'm not exactly new to YouTube, but it's not something that has been a big part of my life in the last few years. So you know how to work it better than me, probably. But anyway, go to the Live tab, and that's when you're going to see all the archive shows, or at least the ones we've been doing for the last month or so. Okay? All right, so let's dive right into the cosmic dance for the week of August 25th. And of course, the big thing going on is that Venus moving into Leo. And that did happen yesterday. And she moved into a sign that is fire, and it's fixed fire. And I'd like to start with those basics because, then we can build the foundation. Fire is associated with our spirits. It's associated with our wills, and think about fire. Many of the qualities of the fire signs have to do with just what you think about the element of fire, how quickly it moves. It's unpredictable. It's very noticeable. It's vibrant. It's like right up in your face. It's hard to ignore fire. It's inspirational. And there again, because it speaks to our souls, if you want to see it that way, or to our spirits, it's excitable. But Leo is also one of the fixed signs of the zodiac. Fixed means that its job is to hold energy in place. So all of those fixed signs, including, like Aquarius and Taurus, what we see in those, and Scorpio's the other one, when those signs, they hold the energy in place. They're the ones, there's nobody more stubborn in a sense than that airy Aquarius or that fiery Leo or that watery Scorpio or Taurus in Earth. Sometimes we kind of blame Taurus for being the really stubborn one, but there's, if you look at all those fixed signs, it's their job to not let the energy just move too quickly, to really dig in some roots and to stick. I don't like to say stick to their guns. I've got to find another phrase other than that, but you get the drift. To stick to something. That's what that energy is. And that makes Leo, I think, even more bold and kind of in our face because of that. Now, Leo is ruled by the sun. Every sign has a planetary ruler. Well, think about that. Arguably, the sun is the planet that most people would say is the most important in the solar system. Certainly on an astronomical or physical level, yeah, without our sun, where are we? But astrologically, it's important too, because it has to do with the ego. It has to do with our identity, who we think we are. So this is the planet that rules Leo. So there you start getting those threats, those trends, those feelings about Leo is, we may not be a Leo, but Leo is that part of us that really wants to express our own individuality, to have our own identity, to know who we are, to not just get lost in the crowd. So Venus, the planet of love, and we're going to talk a little bit about her too before we get into some of those other more sticky details maybe, but Venus is associated with, and first I'm going to give you the shortcut. We associate her obviously with love, romance, partnership, money, even resources, but a more comprehensive version that helps you get a little bit further and apply it to your life a little better is that Venus is associated with our values. What and who do we think is important and worthwhile? What's attractive and why do we think it's attractive? And of course, you don't have to think too hard or look too far to understand that we all are pretty different when it comes to that. I mean, in fact, thank goodness, right? Everybody doesn't like the same color or the same fabric or the same hairstyle. Now, obviously, we have trends, we have, fads and fashions. But Venus, wherever she is in your personal chart, like where she was when you were born, the sign that she was in, the house of the chart that she was in, tells you a whole lot about kind of when you were born, what stamp did you have in terms of what's important? What does love look like? What does attractive look like? And think about that too. One person, they put on a pair of blue jeans and, a button-down shirt, and they think that's just the sexiest thing in the world. And then somebody else I saw recently, pictures from a 69th birthday party that I could not believe, because literally all the guests were asked to buy these evening gowns. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And like I said, it made me laugh. I thought, I'm glad I didn't get an invite to that, because I'm not sure I could have afforded to go to that party. But in any case, that woman wanted her 69th birthday party to just be a total splash. And by the way, she's a Leo. I don't remember the rest of her chart, but she is a Leo. So, and she, of course, had this beautiful sequined gold gown. It was perfect. I mean, it truly was perfect for her. And everybody at the party looked like Vegas showgirls. I mean, truly, it was just amazing, the pictures. So this Venus is, what do we value? What do we think is attractive? So, of course, that goes to partners and money and resources and all our material stuff. I want this, not that. I want that color, but not this one. So it's also associated with our artistic ability. The arts in general, music, dance, painting, sculpture, performance, especially in the sign of Leo. It's our sense of style, our sense of aesthetics, our tastes in fashion and clothes, and how we make ourselves and our homes and our stuff attractive. That's what it is. Venus rules two signs. So here again, you might start seeing a little differentiation or how Venus expresses. Well, she is the current ruler, and I say that because as other planets are identified, and should they be added to the astrology zodiac in Western astrology, which has, that's what happened with Uranus and Neptune and Pluto, then Venus too may only rule one particular sign. There may be another sign or another planet that comes in and rules Taurus, and maybe she'll just take Libra. But that's a story for another day. Right now, she rules Taurus. And that's where we see the affinity for, or her influence for, money and finances and material, physical things, resources, but also safety and security, food, housing. We want our bodies to be comfortable. And if possible, we want our surroundings to be luxurious. And I'm going to introduce a little story here that, sometimes as an astrologer, just looking at all these different charts, I love like interacting and trying to understand people through these signs and through their placements. Well, I knew a woman who was just very, very, very Taurus. And boy, I'll tell you what, most of her conversation outside of work was always about food. And she loved to go to really expensive restaurants. And if you needed, a referral, if you wanted a recommendation for a restaurant, she was a person to ask. But one of the things that just amazed me was that she loved chocolate pudding. And she would buy those little pudding cups at the grocery store, which to me taste flavorless. They are just like the last thing in the world I would eat. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make her homemade chocolate pudding. So, of course, I have this fabulous recipe. It is rich. It is dark. It is chocolate. It is sweet. It is, it's got butter in it. It is just like, to me, the perfect thing, the perfect chocolate pudding. Well, I brought it to her and she didn't like it. And I was amazed because I'm like, the astrologer in me is going, wait a minute. She loves good food. How could she possibly not like homemade chocolate pudding over these little store-bought containers? But what I realized is that she had been brought up with those little chocolate containers from the store. So it had more to do with safety, security, hanging on to the past, what is familiar, which are things there again. Taurus is a fixed sign. So that's what that was. She didn't want a new kind of chocolate pudding. She wanted the one that she knew. So there again, you kind of ferret those things out. When you recognize that it's more than just like one person would say, well, that's not luxurious. That's not a Venus thing. It is, because with Taurus, it is about security. It's about safety. It's about being familiar and comfortable in our skins. Now, Venus also rules Libra. And that's where you see the connection with love and romance and relationships and the artistic part too. But this is also where you see Venus getting involved with justice, because this is the scales, right? So you need to keep everything fair and balanced. You need to keep those scales straight. It's about diplomacy and manners and grace. So that's where you get all those different ideas, those different facets of Venus being demonstrated through those signs and into our lives. So when we look at Venus now in Leo, and there again, oftentimes I hear people say, oh, but I don't have my Venus in Leo. No, you don't. But while the world, is under this influence, we might as well pay attention and kind of enjoy it and take advantage of it. Because what happens is Venus is going to channel, she's going to use Leo as her vehicle for manifesting our personal values and preferences in the world. So some people, no doubt, they're going to enjoy this a whole lot more than other people, but I think everybody's going to get something from it. This is the energy of just having permission to be fabulous, to be extravagant, to be bold. So, and I was kind of laughing to myself because I get my hair cut every 5 weeks. So yesterday, right about the time that Venus was changing signs, I was getting my hair cut, and I just kind of laughed because I didn't plan that on purpose. But it's just the way it worked out. But that's so perfect because once again, Leo, the hair, it's the lion's mane, right? So if you're going, hey, I need a new hairstyle, I need to cut my hair, I need to color my hair, or do something different, or I need something new to wear, and I need something different fashion wise. Well, that's Venus and Leo. So doesn't mean you have to go crazy, but you can certainly, get into the feeling of it and indulge yourself a little bit, because this is not the time to be shy or settle. This is a time to just see those opportunities and those interactions. And I always associate Venus and Leo with accessories, like whether or not it's jewelry or it's something new for your hair. It's this accoutrement, so to speak, that we want in our lives. So, if there's something that's going to amuse you, if there's something that's going to adorn you, that to me is Venus and Leo, because this is our opportunity to use the world for our self-expression. And it is fun to rethink our personal style. But it's not just about that. It can be about all kinds of things. So there again, try not to limit yourself to, oh, this is just about relationships. I've got a relationship, or I don't have a relationship, and yes, I want one, or no, I don't, or whatever. It's not just about that. It's about how we see ourselves as attractive and make ourselves attractive. So this might be the time to, even if it's one small thing that you change or that you add or that you take away and say, this makes me feel more authentic. That's Venus and Leo. So how do we want to make ourselves look beautiful? But now, as we talk a little bit deeper about Venus and Leo, I think it's easy to kind of get this idea that she's really superficial, that, it's all about the surface. But I want you to know that it's really not, because the one thing about Leo, they love to be in love. So there again, if it's a sun in Leo, if it's a Mercury, if it's a Saturn, all these different planets being in Leo, what you'll notice, they really love to be in love. They want a soulmate. They want that permanent, that till death do we part kind of relationship. And they're dedicated to it, because even though they can look kind of showy and superficial, on the surface, under the surface, their devotion, their affection, and their loyalty is real. Now, there again, it's a fixed sign. So think about it. When they find somebody, when they say, this is it, this is the love that I want, they are incredibly faithful to that. And a few things I also want to kind of just point out here, once again, during this particular time. And there again, through about the middle of September. With Leo, romance never gets old. It's not about, oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to do all these wonderful little things and I'm going to attract somebody. But then once I get him, it's just old hat. Romance never gets old, especially if Venus is in Leo. Because of that happy ever after, they keep working for it. They want to be adored. They want somebody who loves them. And I use that word adored because this is the other thing I've noticed. It's funny. When I hear somebody, I don't know how often you hear people say, but I'll hear somebody describe relationships and they'll say, oh, he just worships her. Or, oh, yeah, she just adores him. I almost always want to go running for my astrology software because I go, that person has Leo in their chart. Those are the words that they use. They don't just go, oh, he's so in love with her. They will use those words of royalty and nobility. They worship each other. And like I said, I think it's kind of funny because I used to know somebody and she used that all the time. And I just wanted to go, really? All those couples just adore each other? I mean, it seems so extreme to me. But once again, when Leo is involved, that's how they see it. But it is true that you can find many examples of people that you would say, yeah, from the outside, you go, how did these people even get together? Like Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. And Bacall did have a Virgo sun, but her Venus was in Leo. And, for the most part, their marriage and their love affair was considered pretty legendary, as was the one between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And of course, that was for the most part an arranged marriage between Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. But, all through time, the histories and the kind of biographies of them all just say what an incredible love affair they had, that they kind of lived for each other and their children. It was very unusual for that particular time. And, he's the one he was a Sun Virgo, but he had Venus in Leo. And so it's very interesting, that whole, if you're into history and want to look at that love affair too. And of course, there's a number of people to look at. But while Venus is in Leo, what I want to tell you is just things like if you know somebody who has a birthday, now, of course, they're a Leo, right? Or just if you're celebrating something, an anniversary, or, somebody's gotten a promotion or anything's going on, what I would say is make it extra special. Because Leo, I've noticed this with Leo, for the most part, I would say you could probably buy me something and you could hand it to me in a brown paper bag. And I'd, rip that open and love whatever was inside. Leo wants all the razzmatazz. So if you're giving a gift, if you're taking somebody out to lunch or you're doing something special, wrap it up. Use the ribbons, and especially red and gold and purple. Those are the Leo colors. Those are the colors of royalty. And it makes all the difference in the world. And there again, you go, what does it matter what the wrapping looks like? That seems so superficial, but I'm telling you, you will see somebody's eyes light up because I think they see that as you put all that attention into the detail. So of course, they're probably going to love the gift inside, but they want it to be special. They want it to look special. So go the extra effort and make sure that you're not just, hey, here's a gift card. If at all possible, if something is going on this month that you really want, somebody you care about, then make it special. Even if it's one ribbon, even it's whatever that means, a sticker on the outside of the card, or you get the drift, whatever it is. Just remember, people, all of us, it doesn't matter if our Venus is in Leo, we all want to be special this month. We want to be adored. We want to be worshiped, or at least we want to believe that we're, worthy of it, right? So try it out. Treat yourself, do that same thing for yourself. Maybe put, flowers on your table when you eat, or just, treat yourself to the good china, whatever it is. Just know that this is the time to act a little bit royal, to act a little bit special, and make everything worth it. Okay. And so think about, just the small things you can do for your space. And there again, when you wake up in the morning, is there something like, oh, you threw those, pants over the chair last night? It makes you not feel special. What makes you feel special? What makes you feel like you're living a worthy life, a valuable life? And here again, you don't go out and spend a lot of money. You just think about what is attractive to you. How do you want to make life more attractive, more enjoyable, more fun, feel more like royalty? And there are so many small little things that you can do. And there again, think about where Venus is in your own chart. What does she respond to? If she happens to be in Taurus, like there again, that might be the person with the blue jeans and the button-down shirt or the t-shirt or whatever, looking like a farmer, looking like a gardener, looking like somebody, even a business person in a suit. That might be what they think is the most attractive. So it's up to you. Let it be up to you what it is. All right, now I'm going to talk about those aspects that Venus is making. And I want to put a disclaimer right up front and say, I know. Last week in my article in the Power Peak and on this show, I was preaching about Virgo and privacy and solitude and the importance of maintaining your personal space. That is Virgo. She's self-determined. And we have the sun now in Virgo. We have the new moon was there too. So we are under a tremendous influence of Virgo right now. But I'm kind of not apologizing. I'm still going with that. But what I'm saying this week, I'm going back on it just a little bit, because despite the fact that the sun is in Virgo and that new moon was in Virgo. Now we have Venus, what we think valuable, is in Leo, the sign before Virgo. And we can't ignore that. And Venus in Leo is going to make, or is making, I should say, because we are in the midst of it, like right this moment. If you're listening to this live, we are right in this moment of Venus and Leo making some extraordinary connections with some planets. And that makes this particular transit of Venus through Leo, I think, particularly important. And what's happening, and I'll tell you, sometimes as I write my article for the Power Peak, I think, boy, this just sounds like a broken record. We were just talking about these planets, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. But it's because those planets don't change signs very often. And all of them have changed signs since last December. And so what is happening is that and by the way, they're slow movers. So Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, the planets that are farthest away from the sun, they're all sitting there at 0 degrees, 1 degree, 2 degrees. They're barely into those signs, and they're going retrograde. So they all moved into new signs and then went into a retrograde pattern shortly thereafter. So what that means is they're just like hanging out at the very beginning of the signs that they moved into. And in fact, Saturn and Neptune will both move back into Pisces, if I remember correctly. So then then they're really hanging out at the very end of Pisces, and then just 0 degrees of Aries. And so by the time we get into 2026, especially in the spring, is when we're going to see all 4 of these planets for real in those new signs. And the retrogrades will not take them back into the previous sign. In fact, Pluto is in Aquarius and will not backtrack again, but even though it's going retrograde. But the point is, what's happening is every time a planet moves into a new sign, every time the moon moves into a new sign, well, think about it. There are these planets hanging out at 0, 1, 2 degrees. And so those planets make angles. It might be a 90-degree angle. It might be a trine, which is 120 degrees. Could be an opposition. But every time a planet makes a change, boom, 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 they're actually connecting to those 4 planets. Now, you might say, why is it different? Well, these planets all move at different speeds, or rather, that's what it looks like, to us on planet Earth. Well, eventually, they are going to be separated. We're not going to see them all bunched up at 0, 1, and 2 degrees. Usually they're all over the place. And that's why this is unusual, because every planet will make those connections while it's in a sign, but it's not going to do it like within 12 hours, or it's not going to do it within 24 or 48 hours. But right now, until those planets finish their retrogrades and really get up to what we call their speed again, they're bunched. They're just bunched right there together at those degrees. And so that's why every time these planets, and even the moon, she goes boom, 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 she hits every single one of them through an angle. And of course, in astrology, those angles are either challenges or they're helpful. They're assists, like getting assist from a friend or, a kissing cousin or something, or it's a challenge. It's sitting there and going boom. And so it's an obstacle. It's something that we need to take into account. It's something we need to make an adjustment for. So that is what is happening. But the reason I love talking about this with Venus is because, once again, think about Venus is the way we see our relationships. Now, is there anything more important to most people than relationships? And I would say no, because even if it's the relationship with a pet, the relationship with a boss, the relationship with a neighbor, it doesn't have to be an intimate relationship. We have relationships and partnerships with Mother Earth. We have these relationships in all parts of our lives. It's what gives our life meaning. Maybe it's a relationship with your spiritual discipline. It's a relationship with your inner child, a relationship with, your car. So, and I'm not trying to be funny. I'm trying to be real. We have these partnerships with these various either resources in our lives, with people, and people, we've got them playing different roles. So relationships are so important. And Venus making these connections with these four planets. Yesterday she started, last night she actually did shoot out, or she made the connection to Saturn. And today, Tuesday, the 26th, she makes a relationship, or she makes a connection to Neptune and Uranus and Pluto. So these are not small, inconsequential connections, is what I'm trying to tell you. Now, you also don't have to just go over the top with it, but I want you to know what's going on, because it may make a difference either in how you see something going on in your life, or you may want to mark it and say, because in 2 or 3 months you go, oh my gosh, that's when I met that person, or that's when that happened, and I bought that new car as a result of it. Or you'll recognize how something that's going on either yesterday, today, maybe even through a couple more days this week, you recognize it's that combined energy. And once again, the planets don't make us do anything. This is all symbolic, but it is mass consciousness. So let's look at what mass consciousness is. Just like, for instance, getting my hair cut yesterday. Some would probably say, oh, well, you somehow knew that, Venus was moving. Well, maybe I did. Who knows? But like I said, I made the appointment months ago, or 5 weeks ago, and my hairstylist actually is the one who made the appointment. So but it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, this is the time to pay attention. So maybe some really good things are going on for you today. Maybe some things going on you go, I'm just not so sure about. So let's talk about them, but also know it's an energy, it's an imprint, it's like a stamp. So things may unfold in the next year that you could actually trace back to these couple of days. So when we look at these planets, what we're going to see is, first, Venus made a trine to Saturn. That was last night. Saturn's in Aries. It's fire. Fire loves fire, right? So she reached out and she made one of the most powerful connections that you can make, astrologically speaking. Because it's element to element, fire to fire. Now, also, I'm a real big fan of when I see connections between Saturn and Venus. And I will admit, that is not typical of a lot of astrologers, because Saturn is the planet of discipline. It is, the planet of limitations and restrictions, and it's the planet of, organization. And so people go, well, that's not very sexy. That's not very, what does that have to do with it? Well, I'll tell you what it has to do with it. If you want a long-term relationship, if you want to make an agreement, if you want to make a contract, personal or otherwise, Saturn is the planet you want to see involved, because Saturn is patient, it's dedicated, and it's the one that makes the contract. It is the one that makes the agreement, and it is the one that makes commitments. Now, I'm not going to say that if Saturn isn't involved in your relationship, there's no commitment, but I'm telling you, in my work with astrology, and I've told you this before, if somebody, says, hey, I met somebody new, what do you think? I'm going to look at the moment they met, if I can, or whatever moment they're talking about, and I'm going to look and see what's Saturn doing in this person's chart. Are they making any connection, maybe to those personal planets, to the moon, the sun, Mercury, but especially to maybe Mars and Venus? Because in my experience, if Saturn's involved, especially in a positive way with Venus, then you're talking about something substantial. You're not talking about a one-night stand. You're not talking about that, the affair. And those things are fine, but they're not Saturn. Saturn is serious. So when we see Saturn involved, yes, I always put it in these terms. You may be talking about restrictions and limitations. Well, of course, usually when you make an agreement with somebody, if you get engaged or if you get married, you're usually saying, I choose you, and I'm forfeiting choosing somebody else. And not for bad, but you're just saying, I've looked around and this is the person I'm choosing to make the agreement with. Usually when we choose a home, then we're saying, okay, not that home across town. We're choosing one and then disregarding the rest. Now, I'm not going to get into that, but you get what I'm saying. Yes, there is limitation, there is restriction, because once we make a commitment, we're saying this, but not that. Those other things are not going to be where we're putting our focus or our attention. So if you want involvement with a decision or that something that has long-term potential, you want to see Saturn involved. You want to see that loyalty and responsibility, that energy of being trustworthy and disciplined. You want the patient take things, step by step, the seriousness, the sincerity. And when you put Venus and Saturn together, what you get is emotional steadiness, self-control, devotion. Now, what you can also see sometimes with Saturn and Venus, or Saturn and planets too, but sometimes it's an age disparity. Sometimes you'll find if that's a heavy influence in somebody's chart, maybe they get together with somebody much older than them or much younger, or maybe one person is a lot more mature than the other person. There's lots of different manifestations because once again, Saturn is an authority. So did you get together with your boss? Did you get together with somebody who had more power than you or somebody who works for you? That kind of thing. But we attract under Saturn and Venus. And like I said, it happened last night, but the energy stays there. It doesn't just like bang and it's gone. So, it's infusing this week. We attract or make contracts or agreements for romantic reasons, for friendship, for business partners or professional connections, for investments. This might be a time when something really, really came across, your desk, your eyes, or somebody told you. Maybe it's a really good investment. And maybe I would say, if it's anything that has to do with make money quick, it's probably not a Saturn thing. But if it's something where this is a good investment and over time this is going to build, that's probably Saturn and Venus. And in fact, I'd say the warning sign is get rich quick probably is not, right? Because Saturn isn't into the, do things quickly. So if somehow a valuable resource has come into your life, you're attracting something like that, or you want to, or a good investment, that's the other thing to watch for too. Now, the other thing, though, to watch for, and just maybe more on a superficial level, is that it is true that there's a possibility that maybe you're in a partnership and somebody's being a little more inhibited than usual, or a little more restrained, or a little more serious. That is also Saturn. Now, that's fine, because maybe they're saying, hey, we need to take this relationship to a next level. We need to do something a little bit different. Maybe they are asking for a decision. They're asking for a change in the relationship. That can happen too. So I just say, beware of somebody being really authoritative, but I'm not sure that's what's really going on. But the other thing I will tell you is be aware too that because this is about attracting what we really value, we could also be coming to different kind of choices like getting divorced, parting ways, quitting a job, breaking up with our lifestyle. And why? Because we're looking at it and we're going, you know what? This doesn't work for me anymore. This isn't in alignment with my values. Now, what I would say is, I'm not going to say that the Saturn makes this an easy thing, but I do think it's a natural thing that we're looking at our values. And if something doesn't line up, then the Saturn is going, it's time to make a different agreement. It's time to really get serious about this and to quit kidding yourself. So there again, this isn't all just one-sided, like, hey, everybody's getting engaged. This is also about looking at things in your life and making different choices based on what you really want to build for the future. That's Saturn. Okay, the next thing is that Venus is making a favorable, this is also a good energy, not quite as strong as the trine, but a favorable sextile to Uranus. That's happening today. Now, Uranus is the planet that urges us to take a risk, break free. If you have unnecessary limits and restrictions in your life, Uranus says, let's do something different. So this energy, when you put these two planets together, what you get is excitement and surprise and flirtation. You get magnetism, especially to unusual or individualistic people or opportunities. This energy is highly creative and imaginative. It's lucky, and it's lucky in love and marriage. It's lucky with creativity. It can be very experimental. What you might find too is this is that kind of flash in the pan where a relationship starts really quickly because of Uranus. You're not even thinking of attracting something in your life, whether it's money or it's a person, and all of a sudden, boom, there they are. You're attracting unique and special people as well. And there again, that's a word. Special is hard. It's got so many connotations, but my point is attracting somebody who's out of the ordinary, somebody who could end up having a significant impact on your life. And so there's lots of opportunities. There's excitement in the air today and here again this week because of this. And Venus is embracing that spontaneity. She's like, hey, let's break a few rules. Let's try something different, because she's making that positive association with Uranus and Gemini, and Gemini is the twins. So, here again, think about it. This is kind of it's not kind of, it is a very different energy from Saturn, who says, hey, I want to limit, I want to make a choice, I want to make a decision, and I want to restrict. Well, Uranus is throwing that out the window. So I'm also saying you could be experiencing a number of these energies or trying to fit them together in your life. And maybe Saturn is saying, I want to live in more alignment with my values. And one of my values is to live large, to be more open, to be more spontaneous. Or it could be the opposite. It could be saying, yeah, the last time I just kind of kept following all these urges, then I end up too distracted. I end up with all these little pieces and never the relationship that I want, or never the resource that I want, or never the decision that I want. But the energy of Venus with Uranus it's for people who don't like complacency. They really do want to experiment and attract something imaginative and out of the ordinary. So there again, if you are a creative person, maybe you're in a field that you're creative, you do something, you're a writer or an artist of some sort. This could be an incredible day for just sparking your creativity. So, just pay attention. Give yourself a few minutes to kind of look at it, or, maybe to sit down with whatever your craft, your art is, and think about it or do it. Okay, now the other thing that's going to happen this afternoon, Venus is going to trine. That's that very powerful, positive 120-degree Neptune in Aries, because of course, Neptune is sitting right next to Saturn right now. So there again, what ends up happening is when a planet makes a connection to Neptune or Saturn, it's doing both, because they're sitting right next together, right next to each other. So Neptune is a planet associated with dreams, intuition, creativity, imagination, and spirituality. So the other thing, and you can imagine how this is kind of a weird thing in the mix too, because once again, Saturn is preaching discipline. Uranus is saying, no, let's take a risk. And Neptune is wanting to transcend, to move past all the physical barriers. And so this is the energy of the romantic. It's incredibly romantic when you put Venus and Neptune, when they're in cahoots, when they're doing their thing. It's idyllic visions of love and romance and partnership. And some astrologers even believe this aspect, you're not going to get everybody to agree, but some believe that this aspect, having Venus in a positive connection to Neptune, especially maybe in the trine, that more than any other kind of aspect, this one is about predestination. Meeting the person of your dreams, meeting the person, a soulmate you were meant to be. And here again, I don't want your expectations to be so high that you're going to go, oh, it's going to happen today. But I wouldn't rule it out either. And remember too, that what I find as an astrologer is sometimes one thing leads to another. Like for instance, you meet somebody or some event that happens in your life today sends you on a path that then you meet somebody who then tells you about somebody else. And so sure enough, the love of your life really does come, but not today, but they come as a direct result of things that are going on today. Conversations, interactions, things that you're thinking. So this is really just this, incredible ability to magnetize and to attract what you want in your life, but on a whole other level than just the physical universe. This is incredibly gifted and creative energy. So once again, if you're doing something, in those lines that, really needs to be creative, this is the day that the energy is just baboom, right? It's also associated with healing and with service industries and professions. And that kind of thing, Venus with Neptune naturally seeks solutions. Because if there's a combination that's kind, that's compassionate, that wants everybody to win, it would be Venus with Neptune. We want to be surrounded by beauty. And today too, and when we're under this influence, we may be particularly sensitive to anything that is negative or ugly. We don't want it. We want the storybook romance or the storybook life, this out of this world spiritual connection. So, here again, it's a good day for spiritual disciplines. It's a good day to just look for transcendental energy infusing your life. Okay, now quickly, Venus is going to oppose Pluto late tonight. And Pluto is sitting in Aquarius, and this is an opposition. So, an opposition is more of a challenge, but usually it's a coming together as, you make, you just come together by everybody giving a little, right? But the other thing, whenever you're talking about Pluto and Venus, you're talking a lot of times about compulsiveness or obsession, about love or relationships or about your stuff. It's a very magnetic, charismatic energy, but kind of when I think of Venus and Pluto, I think of like the idea of a movie star, just like, oh my God, or you think about the waves of teenage girls screaming at the pop star on stage, or you think about the preacher who's hitting people on the head and knocking them to the floor, this almost like you recognize there is something unbelievable going on. Just this, like I said, it's kind of compulsive, it's irresistible, it's intense. So, this kind of energy is very, very sexual, and very intense, but it can also have elements of control and manipulation. So I want you to know, be careful with that. It could be a struggle, it could be an imbalance. This is like when you get into something like maybe you say, oh, I can't just have one potato chip, I just can't have one peanut. Now, I know those are silly examples, but you get my drift. This is a compulsive kind of it's a very strong, hard to control kind of energy. So if you find yourself doing that with anything, that is probably the influence of Venus opposing Pluto tonight. And just beware that people may use sex or money to get their way. That's another manifestation of Pluto being in opposition to Venus. These two planets trying to, combine their energies and each get what they want, right? Okay, now we just have a few minutes left, and I have several things I want to share with you. Mostly, I love talking about people who have the energy that we're talking about, Venus and Leo. But and I don't have time to nearly go through all of these that I've got, of course, because I go down the rabbit hole. But the one thing I noticed that I'm very intrigued by, and I want to look further into this, is, I make whole lists of people who have things like Venus and Leo. But what I noticed is I thought, okay, I'm going to pull out, a handful of people and I'm going to get some quotes. But this is what I noticed. Every single one of these people, I think maybe with one exception, their Venus is connected to Neptune, to Saturn, or to Pluto or Uranus. And I thought, okay, no, wait a minute. That just can't be. There's no reason that every single person I'm pulling out has those connections. And there's probably more to it than that. I mean, maybe it's because those are the people I'm drawn to. Maybe there is some magnetism of those kinds of energies, but I kind of have to laugh to myself because it could have just been somebody with Venus and Leo, but it's not. I mean, these people all have something phenomenal. So, first one's President Jimmy Carter. His Venus is in Leo and it's conjunct Neptune. Now, we were talking about the trine, but the conjunction is even more so because this is where Venus is really combining her energy with Neptune. That planet that the spiritual planet, basically. So Jimmy Carter, here's one of his quotes: "A strong nation, like a strong person, can afford to be gentle, firm, thoughtful, and restrained. It can afford to extend a helping hand to others. It is a weak nation, like a weak person, that must behave with bluster and boasting and rashness and other signs of insecurity." Now, there again, I could go on and on about how that represents Venus in Leo. I'm the king, the queen, but conjunct Neptune. And, it's a shame not to give you all these quotes because there are so many good ones. I'm not going to do it, but you can maybe look up some stuff on your own, or maybe we'll even do a few next week. Leo Tolstoy, do you remember that, somebody who is just like legendary in terms of the books that he wrote? And it just has some incredible things. Well, his Venus is conjunct Saturn and also trine Pluto. Now, he has so many incredible quotes, but the one I'm going to give you is this: love, the reason I dislike that word is that it means too much for me, far more than you can understand. See, you hear that? Pluto. That to me sounds like Pluto and like Saturn. And there again, so many good quotes from him representing that Leo, or, Venus and Leo mixed with Saturn and with Pluto. Then Lauren Bacall, she says hers is actually, she doesn't have those, she's the exception. Hers is trine Jupiter, the planet of luck. And she says, "My every dream and hope and far beyond were to be realized. I couldn't have wished for a man as incredibly good as this man. And even so, I didn't realize every quality of Bogies on that day. He was a surprise and a delight to me continually in the ensuing years." Then William Faulkner, remember, famous author. He has Venus and Leo square Saturn and Uranus. And he said, and I love this: "Perhaps they were right putting love into books. Perhaps it could not live anywhere else." And here again, I wish we could talk about all these because they're really incredible. Maybe next week we will. But we have got to close out the show today. Hey, we've got big stuff going on next week because we have Mercury moving into Virgo. And we also have, by the way, a full moon lunar eclipse on Sunday, September 7th. So we'll be talking about that. So everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. To all the listeners, everybody listening in the archives, thanks to our producer, Serena. Please stay tuned because on 12radio.com and on YouTube, we've got Empowerment with Kelly Whetstone coming up next. I will leave you with one more quote. This is Jimmy Carter. Remember the connection between Venus and Neptune. "Earlier in my life, I thought that things that mattered were the things that you could see, like your car, your house, your wealth, your property, your office. But as I've grown older, I have become convinced that the things that matter the most are the things that you can't see. The love you share with others, your inner purpose, your comfort with who you are." Perfect Venus and, conjunct Neptune. So this is CA signing out. Please come and find me on 12listen.com. Feel free to request a scheduled call on a day and a time that's good for you. We can look at your chart. We can look at your Venus. We can look at any connections you're making, or just, whatever's going on for you, whatever's in your heart and your mind that day. So that's where you'll find me, 12listen.com. You have been listening to Everyday Astrology on 12radio.com and live streaming on YouTube channel Everyday Astrology with C.A. Brooks, where we are changing the way we listen to the world.